I've done a lot of ghost town videos on this channel. I mean, I've done videos about hundreds of ghost towns at this point. And I like to try to keep it a little bit, original on here. So how can I visit these places a little differently and present them a little bit different? So that's what I'm going to try to do today. So first of all, I am in Topeka, Kansas. As I've said before, I coach track and field at Wichita State. We had a meet here at Washburn University, and now I'm going to be heading back to Wichita. And I thought maybe this is a way for, if you're interested in exploring like I do, this is a way that you could do it. And so I'll kind of maybe do a little more of like a vlog today to show you some places that I visit. And the difference that I'm going to do today is I'm going to go kind of blind into these towns. I don't know anything about the places I'm going. I've got a few places picked out, but then there's a whole bunch of other dots on the map that I'm going to at least check out, but I don't know anything about them. And what I'll do is when I get there, I'll just talk about what I see, and then I'll put some fun facts on the screen that I've obviously looked up later after I got home. And so it'll be curious. I'll be kind of like wondering what is the history of the town, kind of like you, but then you'll be finding out before me. Speaking of maps, so what I'm going to be using is this is the DeLorme Atlas and Gazetteer. This is not a sponsor, but they should be. I think many people have told me how many maps they've bought from, I think Garmin sells these now. Yeah, Garmin brand. And so this is what we're going to use. So let me show you the map, and I'll give you kind of an example of my thought process. So this is a little bit southeast of Topeka, but this is the general area I'm going to be exploring today. The green marker that I had used, that's old US 50 that I did a video series about, so I marked that just to give me some reference in the future. But what I'm going to do today is I'm only going to visit unincorporated towns or ghost towns. And so as I start looking at this part of the map, I start seeing places like Brook. I think that's an incorporated town. I'll look that up. Centropolis, I noticed, is not incorporated, neither is Michigan Valley. So those are examples of places that I'm going to go. They must have, something there to be in the darker, bold, kind of font. But then you have something like Appanoose, and it's a smaller dot. I don't know what that is. So I'm going to go there. Maybe I'll go up here. There's a couple of little dots there. But I'm going to use those kind of main areas as, A to B, or A to Z, I guess you could say, and have these little dots in between be places that I'll just drive through, and there might be something there, that might not. Sometimes it's just a location of an old post office. Sometimes it's a church. Who knows? When I'm going to kind of be up in that area, you see it says up to Topeka. So I'm going to be coming down that way out to here, and then I'm not sure where I'm going to go, but we'll probably head down this direction. I'll let you know as we go. So there's Topeka, where we're starting. And the first places I see down here are Pauline and Berryton. So I'm going to check those places out. I've already been to Wakarusa in a different video. So I'm going to go to those two, and that'll be the start. But when you're so close to a city like this, sometimes there's a lot of modern things and there's really not much to see, but we'll go check it out. Our first stop in Pauline was certainly more interesting than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be kind of overgrown by Topeka, and a lot of it is. It's certainly, there's a lot of, I guess you could say, modern buildings. There's a hotel, and there's, businesses. There's like a mobile home park that's pretty run down, but certainly it's not old and historic. But along the main road here, we go along the railroad, and there's an old grain elevator up there. And there's some businesses along the road here, and they had a place called John's, that's a good place to get started. And I'm guessing that's probably an older business, and they have a post office sitting there. So I didn't realize they still have a post office here. And it's a small one. So it's just kind of interesting how close it is to Topeka, but they still have a post office. And so there's certainly, I'm guessing this was a railroad stop when Topeka was smaller. It would have been a couple miles probably from Topeka. So maybe the last stop before you got to Topeka on the railroad. And there's some businesses here. There were people having breakfast, and it looks like there is a kind of its own community of Pauline that's still here. Over to Berryton, and we went kind of up and around the airport. So the airport's in the middle. No drone footage around here. We're just too close to the airport. But kind of the airport / National Guard. And I noticed there was a museum south of Pauline. I didn't go down there, so I didn't get any footage of it. But I did notice on the Google Maps as I was exploring that there was a museum over there, so probably something to check out if you're near Pauline. And so, yeah, up and around the airport over to Berryton. And one of the things besides the map that I use here is I use Google Maps on my phone. And the good thing about Google Maps is if you zoom in close enough, it'll give you maybe historical landmarks or maybe churches or things like that, especially in a small community when there's not too many of those things. So, there's a post office here, and I actually missed it the first time I drove by. I didn't realize it was the post office because it's like a multiple things. But there is a community here in Berryton, and there's a school with a sculpture in the of a buffalo in the front that says 1918 to 1962. So I'm guessing that was moved maybe to the new school. This looks like this elementary school is still being used today. There's a couple churches here. I'm guessing it was created along this creek here. So the last town was a railroad town. This is maybe because of the location along the creek. And there is a nature trail that goes through here as well. So definitely some things to see here in Berryton. So you can see Berryton there, and you see the Combat Museum. So we're gonna go kind of down this way, and I think I'm gonna go straight down to where it says Kinney and then Swissvale. I don't know what those are. Probably old railroad stops. Do you see the little kind of black line with the little cross through it? That was railroads. It could have been current railroads or old railroads. So both of them look like they maybe were on the railroad. So we'll just go kind of straight south down these back roads, hit those two, and see if there's anything there. And then we're going to go down kind of off the page to the next, continue on page 52, kind of where we were talking about earlier going. Pulling up to where it says Kinney on the map, and just to the east of it, there's a cemetery up here, Ridgeway Cemetery, and I saw that on my Google Maps, so that's not on my DeLorme Atlas and Gazetteer, but definitely an old cemetery. So a community of some sort was here. So as I was looking at my map, I thought that maybe those lines were railroad lines, but those are actually power lines. There's a legend in the front of the book that says what that was. So that just means there was power lines going through there. And the railroad lines are those more, has a cross through it. And if it has a dashed line, that means that's an abandoned railroad line. So like right up there, that means that's an abandoned railroad line above Richland. But here it would just mean power lines. So I'm guessing there was no railroad that came through here, but there is a creek, and that's probably why the settlement was here. Not sure what it is more than that. Like I said, I'm putting the information on the bottom of the screen and figuring out a lot of research to do when I get home. Very curious. It's kind of strange not knowing. Usually I know something or I'm looking it up, but the rule on this day is I'm not going to look up any information until I get home. So very curious about what Kinney was and what Ridgeway was. That a school maybe it was a church. Maybe, what was Kinney? It was probably named after a local farmer or something like that. So always interesting how places get their names, and sometimes that information is lost and you're not able to find it. So but yeah, at least the cemetery is here. As we pull up to Swissvale on the map, there's really nothing here. You can see there's a creek there. And then as you go, on the map that I have, there's an abandoned railroad line, and you can kind of see where that is, probably. And that, I think, is also the nature trail that we saw earlier that went through Berryton. So on my Google Maps, I zoom in close enough, it looks like that's what that is. And it follows along the old abandoned railroad line, which is pretty common to have nature trails that go, they have a path and kind of leveled out. So yeah, that's Swissvale. Sometimes you go to the dot and there's really nothing there. As we flip over the page, you can see the faded out Swissvale up there. So we'll head south, And over Brook, I'm pretty sure is an incorporated town, so we're going to just pass through that. There's a few dots here. So let's go check out Valley Brook, Michigan Valley. I looked as unincorporated. And then we'll go back up to Appanoose. I really don't know how to say that. And then we'll go over to Centropolis, which I know is unincorporated as well. So that'll be our next 4 ghost towns or unincorporated places. The only thing of historical significance I found in Valley Brook is the cemetery, and it did say 1880. So that's a nice clue. And there's certainly some old headstones there as you drive into the first part of the cemetery from back in that time. And there's a few houses on the map. The dot for Valley Brook is just a little bit to the south of here, like a half a mile or quarter mile, but only thing down there is a couple farms. But maybe that's where the town or community used to be. Usually the cemetery is not in the old community. It's a little bit away from the community. So it makes sense if it wasn't exactly right here where the cemetery is. Could have been a church down there, a school, combination of that. Could have been a town with a post office. So any of those things are possible. But definitely here the cemetery is a nicely kept cemetery. Now let's head over to Michigan Valley, which is a little bit of a bigger font and a little bit bolder. Maybe we'll find a little more there. And I can see why Michigan Valley is a little bigger on the map, because there is a bit of a community here still. There's some houses, there's actually quite a bit of interesting stuff. You can tell where the railroad was, very obvious with the grain elevator there. It actually says Michigan Valley Grain. And there's a church, and there's a little bit of a tiny remnant of a downtown, maybe with a couple of old buildings that was great. You know, that's an old railroad town, and it's just being more out here in the remote areas. And when the railroad is not stopping here anymore, that's when these towns end up getting really, really small. So it would have been interesting to see it in its heyday. There is another church about a mile away, and I saw a real little building down that road. Maybe it was an old school. You know, some of these old schools, one-room schoolhouses could be out there. It's about falling down. But yeah, pretty interesting out here in Michigan Valley. This little dot might turn out to be one of the coolest parts of this trip, but I still have a little bit more to find out. So it says Appanoose on the map, and when I went through the area where that dot is, there's nothing there, but just down the road is a historic cemetery. And so that's interesting. You know, obviously this is the name. I don't know, I'm not familiar with that name, but I'm guessing it's something, you know, Native American. And then as I'm kind of also following on my Google map on my phone, there's a school and a museum a couple miles from here, and it's all, you know, got that same name. So I guess we'll go down there and check that out. And it's certainly, like I said, using the 2 maps, because the museum and school is not on this map and it's a couple miles away, but luckily the nice people of Google and the people who contribute to those, you know, things put those landmarks on there. So yeah. Cemetery is pretty awesome. Let's go check out the rest of the area. There's a cemetery over there on the right, and across the street there's some sort of old building. Looks like probably a church. Unfortunately, it's got a gate that's closed and you can't go down there, but yeah, definitely an old building there. Very interesting area. It's also interesting how things are so spread out over several miles. It makes me wonder, you know, was there more here? I came upon this old school from 1919 that is still in use. It's part museum, but then they have a newer school behind it, so I'm not sure what the old building might still be used for, but it says the West Franklin Elementary at Appanoose, and there's a church, kind of a newer church along the way. I found a cemetery called Dean Cemetery, and it looked like maybe a school next to it, old school. So yeah, it's never would have known all this stuff was out here. And certainly it's a Sunday, so nothing's open in terms of like a museum here, but maybe someday I'll come back and check out the museum and learn more about Appanoose. Centropolis had to have been a much bigger place. You can see that when you come in, there's still a lot of people that live here. I say a lot compared to the other places we're going. And a couple streets, they got a couple churches. It looks like a business. It's from 1926. It says started in 1926. There's a building dated 1883. One of the churches says 1858. So this has to have some history, and it's named Centropolis. So it either had to have been a much bigger place, or the dream of it being a much bigger place had to have been when they put that name together. Okay, I'm gonna make one more little trip here on this trip, one more little trip within the trip. So there's Centropolis. I'm gonna head over and cross over US 50 and go over to Peoria, because there's 3 dots. There's Peoria, Imes, Larimore. So I don't know, maybe we'll find something over there that's interesting. Kind of interesting here at our last stop with Peoria and Imes, and they're really close together, but appears they probably were 2 separate communities. There was also this other dot on the map, Larimore. I don't see anything over there, so I'm not sure what that was. Maybe just a post office, but you can see the river that comes through here, and both of these towns or communities are on the river, but they're separate. You can see where the railroad went over here by Imes, and now that's the Flint Hills Nature Trail. So yeah, pretty interesting. There's a very small community there. There's more of a community in Peoria, although I don't see a lot of historic buildings or old buildings, mostly just houses. So there are some people living there in Peoria. Well, thanks for riding along for this video where we're kind of randomly checking out some ghost towns, and sometimes it's fun not to have a plan and not to quite know what you're coming upon. And there's so many places out there in rural areas that you can explore. Sometimes they're home runs, like there were a couple of them in here, and sometimes there's nothing there, and that's kind of the fun of the adventure. So I enjoy finding out, and sometimes when there's nothing there is still a story of, you know, what it used to be and why there's nothing there. So hopefully you enjoyed it. I still had fun. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of that video. And now that you're here, let me tell you a little bit about some of the extras that we have on the channel. One of the things you can do is you can become a member. There's 3 levels. There's the supporter level, there's the producer level, and the executive producer level. And all 3 levels have different perks, and as you are more supportive financially, there's more perks. We have extra videos every week and a lot of fun stuff going on in the member section. If you haven't done so, make sure you check out travelwithawiseguy.com. We've got lots of extra stuff on there, and one of the things is merchandise. You can get you Travel with a Wise Guy t-shirt. We have Death Go Round t-shirts. We have some coffee mugs, different things that are a lot of fun, and people seem to have enjoyed. Good quality there. Also on the website, you can do things like check out the Google map. I have a pin dropped in every place I've done videos about, then a link to the video so you can look at the map, and maybe there's somewhere where you live or somewhere you want to go. You can check out that map, and it seemed to be a very popular thing. You can sign up for my newsletter. I do that about every 3 weeks. It's totally free. And there's also all kinds of other links and tidbits in there, old videos, podcasts, just everything I could think of I throw on the website. So make sure you check out travelwithawiseguy.com. Thank you for everyone who has been supportive of this channel, and thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. And now for the reason you're probably here, the outtakes. Hey. Hey guys. I stopped to get some coffee, Coffee Head 2019. They got a cool little logo. It's certainly a local spot, and the coffee's pretty good. I love the top. They have an awesome top. Hey. Hey there. Do you like back roads? Are you like me, and one of the best things you can think of is hitting the road and exploring all weekend long, kind of having no clue of where you're going, but ended up finding a whole bunch of neat stuff? Well, if that's the case, I've got the thing for you, the DeLorme Atlas and Gazetteer. This is the perfect reference guide for what you need. They have recreation sites, campgrounds, fishing areas, detailed topographic maps. It's unbelievable. It's the only thing I use. Travel with a Wise Guy definitely gives it the thumbs up. Come on, that would be like a great commercial. Give me some money, Garmin.